Greetings, nerds. This is Saint and Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Paul. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good.
That's good.
I
Glad.
find it amusing that since we are now on StreamYard doing this recording, and you put together a full countdown, you still insist on doing a countdown before the countdown.
Yeah. Well, it's a cue for myself as much as anything.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Very, very nice.
yeah,
Um, Unfortunately, you were sick this past weekend, so you missed
yeah.
out on all of the mayhem that kind of went about because I'm sure some of our listeners have Netflix, and I'm sure they caught wind of the latest new viral show from Netflix called Adolescence. And I watched it not once but twice. And I think I might have watched the first episode, at least the opening sequence, at least 3 times.
Mm,
So, I'm not gonna go into detail. I went into cold, only having read the description of what the show is on Netflix, and essentially it's about a 13-year-old being accused of killing another 13-year-old. That's all I'm gonna say.
mm.
And I will say it is British. So us Americans watch it with subtitles because there's even points where I'm reading subtitles and I'm like, I don't know what that means. That is British slang and I have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
But
We had to do that. There were a few times I know we were watching Supercell. We had to
yeah,
do that too because it was set in South London. So,
yes.
yeah. So some of the slang definitely needed the translation there.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, that's not what subtitles do. Like, they're not
yeah.
going to translate the word
No,
for you.
yeah.
But you're not going to be able to even hear like I'm pretty sure they said this. Did they say this? Okay, I still
Yeah,
don't know that what that means, but
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Context
So
clues helps in those situations sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So I do recommend it for reasons and eventually whenever Will gets around to watching it, I'm sure we can do a more spoilerish overview of the show that is very interesting and
Mm,
I'm just going to call it right now. If this show does not at least pick up one Emmy, and it can be in several different categories, I will be
mm.
shocked.
Huh.
And it'll be a crime.
Wow. Oh,
Okay?
wow.
A
Okay.
crime. It'll be a crime if this show does not get a single Emmy because my God. And I'm not gonna even say categories, but there are a few different ones.
Mm,
That's it.
mm.
And which leads into the next thing I want to bring up um, about reward season.
Yeah.
So I did it yesterday. I saw that part of my Hulu Max Disney Plus bundle thing, Anora, is
Mm,
streaming
okay.
for free.
Yep. I saw that too.
I
Yeah.
don't know why it won Best Picture. I don't know why Mikey won Best Actress.
Mm,
I have no idea. It's a freaking long movie. First of all, it's 2.5 hours. There is about a half hour to 40 minutes I actually enjoyed. And
mm.
then the rest of it, I was like, well, it was the beginning part where she falls in love. Love is a stretch. They get together and there's this whirlwind and it's a fantasy and everything and she thinks like this is it, this is her chance out. I totally understand all that,
Mhm.
but their chemistry was just like not it at all. Like it was not there. And so then, and I'm gonna spoiler this because I don't think it's worth anybody's time. Like by the end of it, everyone, like I kept hearing like, oh, it's a really funny movie, and
Mhm.
then the ending is sad.
Mm.
So I thought the people were gonna kill her because that was the whole thing. Like like he's technically the heir of a Russian organized
Right.
family.
Right.
So I thought they were gonna kill her, and they were setting it up, and just, I mean, they get and their marriage annulled, and the Valia goes back to Russia with his parents, and then we still have another 20 minutes of this movie.
Oh, gosh.
And by the end of it, no, she doesn't. She just breaks down crying while trying to have sex with this other guy. Anyway, it's just, I can see the quote unquote artistic choices, but as a overall product, I was very disappointed and just very confused as to. Now I know the competition was not the best this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand that. But I mean, I don't know. It bothered me that I mean, how many nominees are there for Best Picture these days? 10?
10. Yep.
Yeah. You really couldn't have picked a different non-controversial film. I hear this little film called Wicked is good,
Yeah.
but you might
Yeah.
be saving that for part 2. I don't know. So it just, yeah,
I
I'm
feel that.
glad
Yeah.
I was able to watch it for free.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that because that would have made things 10 times worse.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I said, there is a good 40 minutes where I'm like, why couldn't this be the full movie? Because I
Mm.
really enjoy this. When she finds herself with these three different part of the family, not part of, like, these characters, and she's trying to find Valia in New York, like that whole section of it, as soon as, and maybe it's because I never liked Valia, the guy that she gets together with.
Yeah.
So because I didn't like him, and I saw how much of a child he was,
Hmm.
I could not get on board with, like, yeah, you should want to, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, yeah, I had to bring it up that I don't I don't understand. And maybe it's also because I had higher expectations given the
Yeah.
awards.
Well, that's very fair. I mean, whenever you hear a film is won Best Picture, you expect it to be a Best Picture, especially when you think about all the films that have like won in that category in the past. So
Well, yes and no, because I mean, there's always people, whether it's actors or movies themselves, that have won these things, and you're like, how did that happen?
yeah, yeah,
Especially when you look at the competition. So it was not necessarily just that it won Best Picture. It was also because Mikey won Best Actress,
yeah.
and a lot of
Didn't Sean
people.
Baker, didn't he win director as well?
Director, it won like five of the
Yeah,
big categories. It was,
yeah.
yeah. But I had also, like, leading up to the Oscars, overheard conversations from movie critics, or people who review movies, and they mentioned enjoying it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
so
true. Yeah,
it was more about the hearsay from other people of, like, these are the contenders that actually you should watch.
yeah, yeah.
Um Not just because they're nominated, but
Yeah, true.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could, yeah, I hear you because I know I like watching the FYC. It was Scott Mintz, Perry Nemiroff, and Jeff Snyder. Uh, and this year was one of those years where honestly, I don't think other than maybe one or two of the animated films, I didn't watch hardly anything that was nominated. And so yeah, but it was definitely Anora was definitely one of the ones that it was consistently throughout the year they were like, yeah, this is a contender. But I think I think Jeff was like the Substance maybe should have had a better run. But yeah, well, but
Yeah.
award
All
season, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, that leads us to Women's History Month.
Yeah, speaking of award season, so I had a things that I wanted to, since we are in March and we were just talking about award season, and we did not plan this. This is just it just kind of happened. I ended up profiling some Oscar winning first for women. And of course, with the chart here that I put together up in the upper corner is Rita Moreno, who of course she was the first Latina to win an acting Oscar for her role in West Side Story in 1961.
Mm-hmm.
And then Elizabeth Taylor did not win an Oscar for Cleopatra, but I put this on the list that she was paid $1 million for her acting role in Cleopatra in 1963, and that was the first actress to ever get paid that sum of money. Um, Moving to the middle column, we have on my left, the viewers right, Julia Phillips. She is the first woman producer to win the Best Picture Oscar for The Sting in 1973. And then next
Kathryn
to her,
Bigelow.
yep, Kathryn Bigelow. Yep, whichever one. She was the first and only first woman to win Best Oscar for, of course, The Hurt Locker in 2010, and then of course Chloe Zhao won Best Directing for Nomadland, and also was the first woman of color to win an Oscar as well for that film. And then last is not an Oscar winner, but also another just notable filmmaker, Julie Dash. She directed the first feature film, was the first African American woman to direct a feature film theatrically released in the United States, in a film called Daughters of the Dust in 1991. So those are the profiles for this month.
Wow, very very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew two of them. I knew about West Side Story, and I knew about Kathryn Bigelow,
Yeah.
and Chloe Zhao. Um, I also
Yeah.
I
And I think,
also am aware
yeah.
of.
Yeah. And I think Nomadland also won Best Picture that year, too, if I recall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I think that's why
Probably
she got the
not,
two.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
no idea. Yeah, I think yeah, yeah. Okay. Moving on to things that we know for sure. We're going to start things off with Daredevil Born Again, episode 4. And then, Will, please correct me if I mispronounce this title, because I believe it's a law term,
It's
that you
yeah. It's
that
yeah. It's
you
not.
huh?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, okay, okay. Or do you just want to say it and then explain what it means, because it completely goes over my head.
Sure. So the episode title this week is Sic Semper Systema, which is a Latin phrase, and that roughly translates is the thus always to the system. And the meaning of that is that the system of a government or can be overthrown or challenged, which is some of the themes that were um, really resonated quite throughout this episode with all the various plots that we saw with Matt, with of course with King, with Fisk, and one a very uh, hyped appearance that people were very excited to see, Frank Castle returning as the Punisher. John Barathol returning as the Punisher, and of course with the poster here, you can see it does have the Punisher logo on it, and this is part of the promotional materials that Disney Plus put out right before this episode aired, just to tease that the Punisher was returning. So that's what the title of the episode is, and some of the thoughts. So Sarah, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, so wait,
Yeah.
you cut off briefly at the end. So what does it mean one more time?
Yeah. So basically, um, the it roughly means that a system or government can be overthrown or challenged.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Um, and does that relate into the what I noted as a very flirty, but also a very lawyer heavy term conversation between Matt and his opposing counsel on Leroy's case?
yeah. I mean, I think that Leroy's case is part of it because it's the I guess for me was the bigger themes that were going on there because when you think about Matt, does hold the legal system up to such high regard, and he's really trying to go about things the right way, as far as going straight and not being a vigilante anymore, and working through the system, and then how the system, with Leroy's, very very powerful, I thought, moment there whenever he and Matt were discussing about his situation and how he's been jerked around by a system. Um, you know, it was illustrative of like how the system is so messed up that you're like, y'all are like going after a guy who um, basically just stole a box of candy, goes and pop,
Mhm.
and 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 then you have the system, is failing this man because they're spending more money to like keep him
Locked
locked
up.
up. Yeah. And so when you see that, and then later in the episode, which really drives home the point as far as you know um challenging or overthrowing the system, when Frank like really nails into hard into Matt, when about Foggy, and especially
Right.
when it names dropped name dropped Bullseye and what happened. It really like makes the point that like, why are the system that we have here is just so, it's not working, and and sometimes we have to take matters into our own hands in order to get actual justice. So so when Matt was having that back and forth with the prosecutor about trying to knock off days off of Leroy's sentence, he was just like, look, I mean, come on, really, you're gonna like do all this effort for a guy even though he has some priors, but at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, Matt's trying to, within the confines of plea bargaining, trying to push back on the system to be like, look, let's just be, let's have a let's be reasonable here. And then of course there's other levels that we see throughout the episode as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I just like the line, "Could it have been a scroll?"
yeah, that
That
was
was
good.
I
Yeah,
mean, to go through Secret Invasion, that was a great payoff.
yeah, that, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Um, so then, what are some of those other levels, that you mentioned?
yeah. I think like Kingpin with his whole, I think I think with how they are, he's trying to, he is trying to be straight now and trying to fix the city, but he at the end of the, there's still this undercurrent of the vigilantes and stuff that um that are out there taking the law in their own hands, as far as trying to resolve some of the crime issues that the city still has. So so yeah, so Kingpin wants to
But
like clean up
that's
things and do
not
it right. Yeah,
but yeah, but that's not really his problem right now.
not right now,
The
but I'm just saying, for
vigilante.
I'm just foreshadowing issues down the line. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So his current problem is all of the red tape that
yeah,
bureaucracy involves, and then the mob bosses, because he has a foot in both worlds. Same
yeah,
thing with Matt. He's a vigilante. You can't necessarily just wake up one day and say, I'm no longer a vigilante. And then at the same time, he's a lawyer. So,
Mhm.
um, and often def- is defending counsel. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Where do we want to go from there? What did you think about Fisk and Vanessa's marriage counseling?
Yeah, that was very, very interesting moment there because it really like got into the depths of the forgiveness, the infidelity. Her, when I was watching it last night, and when she was describing um how Adam made her feel, and as far as the art and all those kind of things, he was basically filling a void that when Fisk was out of commission, he was filling that void that that she was missing. And then now that Fisk is trying to go straight, and there's still this void because the man that she loved is morphing into something else. So it's very like hard for her to to feel that belonging or feel that connection with them anymore. So to seeing the dynamics between the two of them, um, as far as seeing how seeing how she's reacting to his venture, um, was very interesting to me. And also the other thing too that I did like about at the end of the one session, whenever the counselor asked Fitz to step out, and then they had a
Yeah.
discussion about
He asked if you're okay.
yeah. I thought that was a good little moment just to like really you know touch on the issue of domestic violence without in a very contextual way that wasn't like preachy, but also like made the point. And then of course how they followed up through it later in the episode about how she did not only did she tell her counselor that she didn't fear him, but then whenever they were having the discussion at the table later in the episode, um, and Fisk was talking about his father and the things that he saw growing up, and he didn't learn forgiveness and those types of things. It was but at the same time that he wasn't going to hurt her. Um, I thought those were really good themes they like put throughout the episode.
Yeah, yeah. I think you got it backwards though.
Yeah,
And I think we talked about this last week that it's not so much that Fisk is changing, it's that he left, he comes back. She's been in control
yeah,
and took and rose to the occasion while he was gone
yeah.
and really came, and she even says it in this episode, I'm
Oh yeah,
not the
yeah,
same woman that you married. And he's I think he's still grasping with that. And then the whole forgiveness thing is really, I found to be very interesting because that was a very, like, I almost felt like the whole show paused right after they said that line.
mhm,
That forgiveness is like the greatest act of love because we know that like what's boiling beneath Fisk. Yeah, it's this vigilante stuff, but Vanessa's always number one.
yeah, yeah,
So it's always like him. Suddenly, he doesn't even have control over the woman he loves and is married to, and has allowed someone else to come into their marriage and touch her and everything. So that is very unsettling. And it's interesting how I thought that they did a good job because we also his one of the members of his staff fucks up in this episode. We kind of knew it was bound to happen with that
yeah.
guy. And then Fisk eventually immediately calls everyone together and gives them a lecture and then demands to know the leak, and the guy fortunately is brave enough to say I'm the leak, and you do see forgiveness, kind of.
Yeah.
Also, with an undercurrent of a, if you do it again, I will fucking kill you.
Yep.
I will. I am. You
Sheila.
only get
Yeah.
one. You
Yeah.
only get one. And then to your point, you fast forward into Adam being in a cage.
Mhm.
It was weird to me though, and yeah, I'm sure he's been down there for a while,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a very long time. But it's still the way he kept crying. I was like, so are they torturing him? Are they going to show us something? But no, it was just Fisk eating dinner while Adam screams,
Yeah.
trying to get let out. So maybe psychosis has ensued in Adam. But I think to go back to your point about the void and the fulfillment, I found it interesting that Vanessa specifically said it was his hands. And
Mhm.
why I found that to be interesting is if you go back and listen to our previous reviews or even rewatch the previous episodes, there
Yeah.
has been a lot of camera shots on Fisk's
Yep.
fists
Yep.
and transition shots, and they've been bloodied and they've been a bit, and like, so it's very interesting that they've put that in, that his hands, Adam's hands, were different.
Mhm.
And then you have this foreshadowing of Fisk, of us getting fed these clues that there is something that Fisk is hiding.
Yeah.
Um and then we found out what that was. I'm sure there's more, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so um I do really like the current relationship dynamics between Amanda and Matt.
Yeah.
Just gonna put that out there. I liked, she's not, I can appreciate that we're 4 episodes in and they're having the conversation like, I'm worried about you when you don't come home, and but it's still new, so there's still like this, I don't know if I can say this, but I'm going to say this. And then he, even to the best of his ability, explains to her what's going on, and it's interesting because he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
Like, his burdens right now are, he was able to get a client proven innocent who then immediately ends up dead,
Yeah.
and then another is serving time at Rikers for stealing a bag of caramel popcorn.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that they've been able to sustain 4 episodes now. And yes, I'm aware that there were at least 2 or 3 fight sequences with Matt specifically, but the absence of the mask, the
Yeah.
absence of that persona. And so my big takeaway from this episode was really, I would describe it, and I think some people could say it's filler. I'm not going to use that word.
No. No.
I
It's
I I would give the description of, think about a tea kettle that is starting to boil. Like the
yeah.
water is boiling and you're hearing that sound. Like and it's on both sides.
Yeah.
It's on Fisk and it's on Matt. Like their nature, they're being pushed to a point where they have to go back. They're going to have to go back on the promise that
Yeah.
they made each other in the first episode.
For sure. Yeah. Anybody who says that this episode was a filler, yeah, that's just they're. I don't know what episode they watched, because to your point, I mean, the plot is progressing forward,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right. I mean, it is, it is simmering, and and their true natures, Fisk and Matt's natures are, you know, even though they made the promise to one another, they're trying to like do different, do different things to, as far as, Fisk being mayor and trying to, build a city and build this port and, do all the mayoral things, even to the
Fill the
point of,
hole.
we built this city. I mean,
Oh my God.
I thought about Paradise. Yeah.
Did you hear this? This is the best behind the scenes thing that I've heard all week.
Yeah.
Um, they had to refilm that
Yes, I heard that.
because the
Yeah.
kids were too good.
Too good. Yes, I heard about that. I did.
And then but it was such a good payoff of then going to the Lavatnia thing
Yep.
and having to hear it again in a different language
Yep.
and the fact that I love that piece of dialogue thread though that it's mentioned early on in the episode by Matt that it's Lavatni History Day
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all this stuff. It's just I was just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's so good.
Yeah, it was so good. The town of Latvia stuck together with the prosecute. Yeah, with that. Yeah, that was great. And I couldn't help but think about Paradise whenever I started hearing it because that was, um, the president had that on his mixtape. And
I did not make that connection, but
yeah, but yeah, but then hearing it like that, and then hearing it twice in this episode, yeah, it was pretty funny. But yeah, but seeing that, and then like you said, but then the juxtaposition of Fisk doing, trying to do all, but then of course the Fisk that we know, has Adam locked up, and
well,
and
yeah.
yeah,
The kingpin of it all
yeah,
is like
and
Adam's in a cell,
yeah,
but it
and also
is interesting in this episode that we follow Fisk. We are continuing to follow Fisk on this very mayor. Like I'm waiting for him to kill that I want Sheila.
yeah, Sheila, yeah, yeah,
Because I always feel like it gets to a point, and then he just like him forgiving the staffer in this episode with Sheila, he looks at her and is like, you know what? And then my previous life, I would have just shot you,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah,
need you.
yeah.
Like that is something he needs her because
Hmm.
she knows the game there that he is now playing and he has not a clue and he makes that abundantly clear.
He makes it very clear,
But
but
he
yeah,
also has a good point. It's like you can't keep giving me all these problems. Like tell me what the first step is and we'll
hmm,
do that.
yeah,
Which I don't know why he would have to say that. I mean, I was like, just tell him what
yeah,
he has to do.
yeah. But I
But
think,
what were
yeah,
you gonna say?
no, no, I think, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to go with about Sheila. It's just like, whenever he cleared the room, and I was really expecting that moment of him, like, was losing it and taking them both out, but again, he pulls it back. But also, I think looking at Fisk, and in the gray suit that he's wearing all the time, he's always wearing gray, and it's really like, there's a lot of visual cues that they're doing in this show, like the wardrobe, and also like the food, like whenever he's making a point about something in the Kingpin-esque way, whenever he's trying to be the Mayor Fisk, he's having like lighter fare. But then whenever, like in the first couple episodes, there's the second, I think it was episode 2 with the police officer with the sandwich, and then this when sitting there eating when that was in the room there with Adam, a very heavy meal, and it was just very visceral, and it's just heavy, and it was it just really like adds, there's like those visual clues and things and set pieces that they're doing in this show that just really set the mood. Or like you say with the writing too, like with the being Latvia, and Independence Day or whatever, and the prosecutor happens to that's their ethnicity, and then he goes to the celebration. So I mean, there's just so many things I like that I'm really enjoying about this show, that it's just very well written and well edited. Because the other thing, as far as the scenes that they had with Frank and Matt, were actually supposed to be later in the series, but they actually decided to pull it forward to this episode to really, to your point, show the simmering kettle, that is building up, and especially the way that Frank, really needled Matt whenever Matt went to, sought him out after finding the shell casing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I will admit it kind of was abrupt to me that we got Frank in this episode.
Hmm.
So it actually makes sense that originally they had planned it for a later episode.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's why it kind of stuck out where I'm like, really? We're going here? And also like there just was something about it. I can't put my finger on what it was, but I mean I enjoyed the scene. It's classic Matt and Frank dialogue. But I also it felt, I don't know, there's something about it that made me think it was a little out of place.
Yeah,
But
and apparently too, they did do some ADRs and did do some reshoots to whenever they did pull it forward in the show. So that was also part of the, bringing it forward
mhm.
at this juncture in the series.
Yeah, yeah. And then we're just continuing to get teased Muse as that also continues to just start to bubble over
Yeah.
whatever Muse has planned. So we will have 2 episodes of Daredevil to talk about next week. And now we're going to move on to wrap up Invincible season 3 with I Thought You Never Shut Up. And the IMDb synopsis is: with the world still reeling, a dangerous stranger arrives, testing Mark to his limits and beyond. That stranger being Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Conquest. I have his opening line of, I enjoy this. There's no greater pleasure than the feel of my fist drenched in your blood. And essentially we got Chicago Part 2.
Yeah.
I will admit, and I don't think this should be a surprise to anyone. I was not engaged in for majority of this episode just because the action, it never really does that much for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like the verbal exchanges, and there was parts of that. And then we also know I think I'm starting to get there, and I think I will be there for season 4. But the Eve and Mark stuff, it just was a very weird way for, it felt way too rushed this season. So even, and then we have the whole fake out of Eve's dead. Oh no, she's not. And I'm like, okay, guys, what are we doing with stakes here? What's going
Yeah.
on?
So that's with the Eve thing. That's a callback to the Adam Eve solo.
Yeah, so the special.
The special, yeah. So with her powers, and I guess the mental block that they had put on to her, that she could only do it whenever she was just like, you know, super distressed or whatever. So yeah, so I mean, I hear you. I mean, I know it's been a thing, growing thing for you as far as just their relationship, and it's still feeling it's a bit rushed. As far as coming and getting on board with it, but I mean, I guess thinking about like the whole like lightning rod concept, for example, with the Flash, or Clark and Lois. I mean, I guess this is since they do pull these things from the Marvel and DC archetypes in the show, and they make it their own. So I guess Eve and Mark are is that same kind of lightning rod concept with one another, to be that homing beacon for the two of them, for each other.
They should have just written it better for the screen, in my opinion, and that's completely my opinion. So
okay, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. Yeah, but I hear you about the fights and all. I mean, it did get to a point where it loses its impact in some regard, in some way. Just because, and I know
Well,
they try.
Conquest, sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah,
Conquest just kept also, it's interesting because it wasn't a, Chicago felt more like a good 20 minutes of just action, right?
yeah,
Between father and son. So they
mhm,
had that going. Conquest, it felt like, okay, he's going to start to beat up Mark. And then, oh no, Oliver's here. And then we get a monologue from Conquest. And then we start fighting again. And then we get Eve's here. Then we get a monologue from Conquest. And there were so many monologues. I was just like, you're you're gonna he's Mark's gonna win eventually
yeah,
because you're too busy talking all of the goddamn time. Like,
yeah,
oh my god. And then you have that moment where at the end he's like, to tell you the truth, I'm really lonely and all of this stuff. And it just that I don't really care. This is first time I'm meeting Conquest. Why do I care if he's lonely or anything? I did, and at that point I was like, "You go, Mark. Yeah, smash his head in because yeah, I thought you never shut up."
yeah. Yeah. So the title worked. I
The
mean,
title does work. The
it
title
does
does
work.
work.
Yeah,
It
because
does work.
I felt that same way too when he finally, like, I did. Now we'll say I did appreciate that last little soliloquy that Conquest had, as far as, all the, I'm good at what I do, and all the Viltrumites, I'm lonely, I'm a victim of my own success. I did like that moment, I will
Mhm.
say, because it was like that. It was trying to, like, instead of him just being an evil mustache twirling villain, but it was still trying. It was also trying to, like, maybe elicit some sympathy for him,
I
as far
don't
as
I
the
don't
viewer, or I don't know if sympathy is the right word, or just, it was just trying to, like, uh, it
it
was,
I think the villain is not necessarily one person. I think the
yeah,
villain overall, the biggest enemy of Mark is his Viltrumite side.
yeah, yeah,
And so we're meeting because we've met a few Viltrumites now.
yeah,
And each time Mark gets his ass kicked to an extent.
mhm,
And and this one was talking about the loneliness because he's now come across how Mark has Oliver and
yeah,
Eve.
yeah,
And like to envy that. And Nolan even says at the start, like, I he has that classic line at the beginning of the season to Alan, like, I think I miss my wife.
yeah.
Like, that's the appealing thing about this race, and arguably other races too, aka Oliver.
Mhm.
But there's that sense of belonging and that partnership and that friendship that even Conquest isn't getting. But then again, the society that he was brought up in as a Vulturmite, like, you didn't need that because he had purpose.
Yeah,
And so it was, I think it was more like what they're doing with any Vulturmite that we've encountered other than Nolan and Mark, is really showing why Nolan acted the way he did in season 1
yeah,
and made the choices he made, and how it is because of this society. And I think the an undercurrent of that, also that loneliness, goes back to, I don't know, 3 episodes ago, the last time we saw Alan and Nolan,
yeah,
where Nolan reveals there's only 50 full-blooded Viltrumites. Well, now there's 49. Well,
yeah.
kind of,
Kinda,
because
yeah.
Cecil, of course, we knew Cecil wasn't going to burn the body.
Oh no,
We
oh
knew
no.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
No, there's no way in hell. I
yeah.
also don't know if his plan's going to work, but we'll see. Um, like I think as a season finale, this did a good job
Yeah, yeah,
because I think pulling Nolan and Alan back into it this late in the game, it would be too much. And so I like the idea that we really wanted to. It's interesting though how Mark has now killed Well, kind of, but he like
He
he
fixed it.
keeps killing people, and he makes a very big declaration in this episode
Yeah,
that if anybody threatens my family or hurts the people I love, I will kill you.
yeah, yeah.
It's
He after yeah, I mean after the whole conversation that he and Oliver had, you know, beginning of the season, why Oliver questioning why don't we kill, and then now Mark has grown. After all of this,
yeah,
he finally is like, okay, fuck it, they're dead.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and I
Now,
guess
granted,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, Angstrom is still technically alive,
yeah.
and we see him
Conquest
even.
technically
Yeah, alive. So Mark hasn't really killed anyone. Like
no,
there's been casualties in this, obviously. I'm sure we'll hear about the civilians that died
yeah,
during the Conquest Mark fight. And then everyone who died in Chicago. Like he's partly responsible for that as well,
mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Um, but yeah, so I think that that's how they kind of get away with like this still being a hero, or Mark still not fully going to the dark side in the
Yeah,
viewer's mind, is that his quote unquote deaths or kills are actually like null, null
yeah,
and void.
yeah. Yeah, there's always either a technician to pull Angstrom away, which the whole Angstrom thing. Speaking of like, I'm kind of over. I think
Mhm.
right now they need to like put him on the back shelf
Yes.
for a minute. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Send him
was
in
getting kind of
paradise.
yeah, exactly.
It's
uh,
just, I mean, it's a thread. Like you can't keep pulling that. Like what's the point at this?
mhm,
Like eventually that thread has to get tied, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. One
um,
thread, yeah, one thread that I thought they did close with Rex and the funeral
yeah,
and I did like how they had the eulogy
yep,
and Robot talking about Rex and how he's taking on the name now, and it was like a nice way to honor Rex. And then of course when Eve did try to talk about him, and she couldn't, she was overcome. But then whenever she and Mark had their conversation about Rex and how it just really drove home the point how much his character has grown and changed, and the impact that he had on the Guardians.
yeah. Um, well, the other like little nugget that they put in there, besides what was his name? Wild Beast or Beast Master?
The
The guy who who helped Alan
oh
and
yeah,
Nolan.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we see him
mm-hmm.
who gets he gets picked up,
Yep,
very Guardians of the Galaxy style. Um, and then there's this whole demon and the Dark Lord
yeah,
thing. Now, has that been teased?
yeah. It
It
has,
it
yeah,
has.
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
I
I think
feel
it was
like
like either season 1 or 2. I want to say it's been a while whenever the last time we saw
okay.
the yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Okay.
yeah,
Now,
it's there. It's been there before.
are they on a different planet or are they on Earth?
I believe they're on Earth.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. So there's also that,
yeah,
and the plan to tie the Dark Lord to Mark,
yeah.
which yeah. Um Interesting. But those were the teas. We really didn't get any Nolan or Allen
Nope.
teas. We've had enough of them for this season. We know what's going on there. But um yeah, I think that is it for Invincible season 3. We got around to it a lot quicker.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it helps that they didn't have some crazy long ass breaks this time,
Well,
and the
granted, we
season was
only,
much better too.
yeah,
Yeah,
and what, we only watched season 2 in January.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, a
yeah.
part of it
Well,
is we shortened that break for ourselves.
yeah, yeah.
And then last but not least, we are starting to watch Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. We are covering episodes 1 and 2 tonight. Yeah, the first episode, called Amazing Fantasy, and described as, during high school orientation, Peter's life is changed forever and a new era of Spider-Man begins. So for some reason, I didn't expect the first episode to really be about him getting the powers. And then I was also pleasantly surprised that they did, like, we see Doctor Strange, and then the spider comes through,
Mm,
and that's how in this universe we meet Peter,
yeah,
or we see Peter become Spider-Man, to an
yeah.
extent. There is a few months later. But what did you think about this introduction and this start?
Yeah, it's definitely. I liked that they tweaked the radioactive spider origin
Mhm.
with this episode, and also it was just I did not know what to expect going into this show. I know it's going to be high school years and stuff, but I had really no expectations, and but I was I it was it, I enjoyed it. I think they did they were doing some swaps as far as some of the characters.
Mhm.
We as far as gender swap or race swaps with some,
Yep.
like, with in the episode, which I didn't have a problem with. I just it was just it's making it very clear that this is in a universe outside of you know since we are in a multiverse saga right now. This is just making it establishing at the outset that this version of Spider-Man and Peter Parker are in a different universe, and I,
Yeah.
so I was like, this is pretty cool. And but they also brought some elements that we've seen from some of the more recent iterations, live action iterations of the character, like a younger Aunt May.
Mhm.
um, and then we just we get introduced to some new characters. I mean, at least for me, newer characters, like his friend that he met at
Nico.
the Nico, yeah,
Nico.
that they met at the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're expanding his friendships beyond just the usual folks that we're familiar with. So I thought these first two episodes were pretty engaging for me, and I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes.
Yeah. I guess the second episode is called The Peter Luck, and it's Peter begins an exclusive internship, but his first day is way more complicated than he expected. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to go back to the first episode, I just love how, like, to your point, this is clearly a different universe, a different version. However, like, it still is crazy how Spidey and Peter Parker specifically, it is different, but it's
Mhm.
so familiar. Like it's walking a line of nostalgia,
Yeah.
you know, and where you see the differences, and then you see the nods to, like, this is also a story being told
Yeah. Yeah.
post Endgame.
Yeah. For
And you
sure.
see Iron Man like, you see little things, and then the fact that the introduction to Norman is done in a very deliberate way to mirror when we meet Spidey in the MCU back in Civil War,
Yeah.
like, and then you just exchange one kind of one good guy for a bad guy,
Yeah.
to made
Yeah.
up. And I also did not know this, but the actor who voices Norman is Coleman
Domingo.
Domingo.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
did know that. Yeah, I did know that. Yeah.
yeah, which I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
cool." And I do have to say, and I looked this up because I was like, "Who is voicing Peter?"
Mm.
It's a really nice voice, and then I saw it's the same actor who voiced him in What If.
Huh.
It wasn't Tom Holland in that
No,
episode. It
right.
was this, and I'm sorry I didn't write the name down, but shouts out to him because I think he is doing a really good job.
Yeah.
He's not overly annoying
Hmm.
and whiny. Um so I think these two episodes really, I'm glad we watched them back to back
Yeah.
because I think it was just like just setting of the scene, setting meeting the characters, and a lot of bait and switches. Like, I mean, you get the Norman bait and switch in the first episode, and then in the second episode, we are introduced to the other character, the quarterback. What's the quarterback's name?
Yeah. Lonnie.
Lonnie.
Lonnie. Yeah.
Lonnie,
Yeah.
it's kind of introduced him in the first episode, but I thought it was interesting when we part ways after school with Peter and Lonnie, and the camera doesn't follow Peter home, camera
Hmm.
follows Lonnie home.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this is headed, but I was like, okay, they're gonna do something with Lonnie. Like
Yeah.
I for some reason I'm getting Prowler vibes, but I don't know if that's gonna be correct. So
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking that too. That or something tragic was going to happen to him. You know.
yeah.
Yeah. Just given his, because he wasn't, you know, the Flash Thompson dumb jock. He was more, he's, this dude, he and Peter like started, because originally Peter had a big crush on his babysitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then then they end up having he Lonnie wants Peter to be his lab partner because he's as big as nerd as Peter is, and they just start geeking out and over
I
science and
don't
stuff.
think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Lonnie wants to learn. Like
Yeah.
Lonnie
Yeah. But
and
he's
he's
not a
he
dumb jock. I mean, he can,
yeah, no, he's not a dumb jock by
yeah.
any means. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just don't think anyone's as big of a nerd as Peter. Just
No. Well, no. True. Fair point. Fair point. Fair point. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he has some competition with these other Osborne interns,
Yeah.
especially Asha from Wakanda, which
Yeah.
I was like, this is great. I like that name drop.
Yeah.
With, he gets assigned to work with Dr. Connors, who,
Yeah.
and it's a gender swap that they did, which was
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very
Carl.
interesting. And
Yeah.
there's even the mention that Dr. Connors is leading the energy division, which is in somewhat of a competition with Stark Industries. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I like I was pleased more than anything else. I mean, this is so far very paint by number, but at the same time, this I it didn't necessarily exceed expectations. It met them more or less.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
they're telling a story we know, but they are telling it in some different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, what I also like with the second episode too, they also show the challenges of Peter trying to juggle being a teenager and doing the lab work and also trying to be a superhero because they were invited to the party and Nico, he was supposed to join her at after the football game, but then then he ends up having to the arsonist like does this thing, and so he's having to like you know go he goes into superhero mode, and we have rescuing animals in the pet shop and everything else, when he's dealing with what was it not Pyro, but what was the name of the arsonist?
I just call him the arsonist.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but yeah. So he's so I like so they were really showing the whole 360 of like what Peter Parker's life is like right now.
Which you could expect from a Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm
About
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Um, and I think we're just going to cover 2 episodes next week as well. And our goal is to finish up um the Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man before Last of Us, and we should be good to go there. So
Yeah.
if you've seen it, then always come back in as we share our thoughts about it. And if you haven't, maybe you will also want to get a bit of nostalgia about this beloved character, and his and this version of his origin.
Yep.
All right. Well, on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M Polk on all the socials at WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me there too at SJ Belmont, SJBLMONT. Please follow our crew on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Scene and Nerd, on Blue Sky at Scene and Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Threads at scene_n_nerd, and visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.